Okay, we're recording now, huh? Boy, this is nice. Lafayette Radio Corporation. So I'll have to check on that Lafayette.
You felt that he was overdoing it a little bit.
I felt that he was. I had the feeling that it was all in my interest, but the green gadget, it's moving. That means it's all right, huh?
Yeah.
But I knew, and he knew, that one red blood cell, it may have been two, but it was minimal. It was consistent with a normal spinal puncture. The important thing is that Dr. Elkins had pointed up the changes in reflex, the positive evidence of my spinal cord injury. And I'm not sure that Steve testified after Elkins. I'm not positive. I can't say. Maybe it was before. Maybe that's one reason that he was trying to be more positive or more. In fact, I believe that Steve testified first, and Elkins refuted his comment about. Oh, that don't sound like him. His testimony in regard to the one blood cell. But that makes it all the worse, because he must have known that Dr. Elkins was going to testify. He had to know, because he and Bill Corrigan and Richard and my father, until my father became so ill that he couldn't take part, were taking an active part in the strategy. So I felt it was ill-advised or ill-spoken or improper, because he knows better. This is one thing that he taught me, for Christ's sake.
Well, up to the...
when I was a student.
Was there anything else that either one of your brothers said that...
Well, I thought that Dr. Richard was very, very professional, very proper, and represented me and our family in the best possible manner. He was, in my opinion, outstanding in my favor.
Now,
Steve was favorable, but belligerently so.
Yeah. Well, he, you know, as I said the other
or nastily so.
His demeanor during this whole thing, in many instances, had that belligerent.
Right. And I think his demeanor affected the news media a great deal, more than mine, or even my not speaking to news media. His obvious attempts to be nasty, or even give false leads to news people at the time, seemed as though he was playing a team or something like that. He's even bragged about it in later years. This to me is the wrong thing. The news people have a job, and it's not funny to try to mislead any more than it is for a relative to come in and tell me some false comment about a person I may think has a brain tumor, because this might lead me in a different direction and delay my treatment of you know, I don't believe that the two situations are exactly parallel, but in a way they are, because a malignancy in the public eye, a malignant feeling or progression, is sort of like a malignancy in a person. A cancer is cancer. It's like communism. This is cancer.
Up to the time that it was your turn to testify, and how did you feel things were going? Were you?
Well, I just felt innocent, like I always have. But at that time, I was confidently innocent, depressed, but I was eager to testify,
There was never any question about your testifying, was there?
Oh, no. Oh, my attorney asked me if I wished, and I said, why, hell yes, I'm going to testify, whether you like it or not. And Corrigan, I'm not sure how he felt before then, but he realized by then that I had become awake enough, or the numbness had worn off to the point that I was becoming aggressive in my insistence. So he said, well, they'll put you through the ringer and blah, blah, blah. I said, Bill, what about the ringer you put me through when you talked to me, when you tried to find out for yourself if I was innocent? Did I not convince you? Do you think these guys can put me through more of a ringer than you? And he put me through all, oh, hell yeah. He questioned me up and down and around and from the side and under.
Before you went to jail.
That's right.
He really gave you
He gave me the going over. And he's a former prosecutor, you know. And he went from stem to stern. And I told him, you know, be my guest. I'm ready because, well, I felt that it was necessary that he be convinced. But I didn't have any hesitancy to talk to anybody that was not prejudiced. But these people like, these ignorant asses, like Schottky, they don't want to question. All they want to do is accuse.
Well, then, how did you feel the night before you testified? Were you nervous, or were you?
I don't even remember the night before I testified. I wasn't particularly nervous that I know of. I actually was eager to get on that stand and tell how I felt and what the story was. Honest, by my mother's grave, I can't tell you that I haven't now any memory of the night before I testified. There was no, if anything, there was a relief, a feeling, well, now I can finally express my feeling or my understanding of what happened and what's on my mind.
When you got on the stand, was there anything you noticed? How the jurors looked at you, or did you kind of size up the courtroom, or, you know, is there anything you can remember from that?
When I first got on the stand, I was, of course, given the pledge or the oath. And I did notice that the jurors looked at me a little more as I testified than they had previously. However, I had noticed that the jurors all of the jurors had looked at me more or less from time to time during all testimony. And during certain parts of my testimony, I looked right at one or two or the jury box. Usually I'd try to look at the jury box as a group. I wasn't trying to single out any one person that might be particularly sentimental or might have a child about the age of young Sam or some gimmick like that. I was trying to be open and honest and straightforward, and that's about it. The only other thing that I remembered about, or can remember now about testimony, was that at the end, John Mahon was questioning me. I think he had started and then terminated the questioning, and he had attempted 2 or 3 different ways of asking me several questions. And about at the end, he sort of slumped on the jury rail and asked me if I insisted upon. I had told him that he had made a a statement, something that I had done this or that, or that I had.
Yeah, let me read this to you.
But I said he was unfair.
Let me read you what he said here. Isn't it a fact that you beat your wife to death, he demanded. No, sir, Sam responded. And after you killed her, didn't you run out of the house toward the beach and injure yourself by falling down the beach steps or jumping off the platform of the beach house? That's absolutely untrue, sir, Sam answered, and I think it's very unfair. Mann sought support from his theory that Sam had gone to the beach to wash off blood from his clothes and skin. In your experience, he asked, what is the best way to remove blood from clothing? I have had no experience along that line, Sam said. Isn't it a fact that cold water is more effective than warm water for that purpose? I am no authority, and I never have tried. After a brief redirect examination, Sam was allowed to resume his seat.
Well, it was about that time that I noticed Mann slumped sort of at the jury rail, that it appeared to me that he hadn't caught me with anything, or even though innocent as I am. The thing that bothers me is that your son or my son, today, tomorrow, a year from now, 5 years from now, could be on trial for the same type of thing. And without some psychology in college, and without and medical school, and psychologic and neurologic training, would have not the beginning of the ability to cope with the type of questioning that this man gave me. This man gave me not question. He didn't want to know the truth. He wanted to get me, and he knew I was innocent at the time. They had evidence and have evidence right now, and I know they do, of my innocence. All he wanted was a conviction, and if it was some young guy that was trained, say, in engineering, or say writing, or any other field, if it had happened that way, I'd probably be dead and gone. I'd be electrocuted by now. Because those questions that he asked, if you study them carefully, are trick questions. And I don't have to tell you, but I mean the average person. They will have to study them and look at them and think, how would they answer these? And how could they respond, you see? And the only basis on which I had to give me a little break to cope with these people, with these vicious aggressors, was that I had the study in psychology and neurology, and psychoneurology, as we call it, as they integrate. This is what bothers me. What if it had been some guy that didn't go to medical school, that had studied law even? Well, law might have helped him, but say business or agriculture, say some farmer's wife or farmer's husband is on the stand answering these questions. Farmers are great people. My family comes from farm stock. On both sides, my grandparents are basically farmers. Though my grandfather was a Methodist minister, his parents were farmers. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with farmers, because in fact I had a few little tussles in prison when people called other people farmers, and I'd tell them, well, there's nothing wrong with being a farmer. That's a compliment in my idea.
There was quite a bit made about the jacket, the folded jacket. How did you feel that? Did that hurt you?
Well, it may have hurt. I should say. It, in my opinion, was.
It may have hurt.
Well, it
definitely did hurt.
It perhaps did. Ariane feels it did hurt, definitely. It was a very obvious memory thing. Somebody came in, one of the women, whoever, may have been...
Mismemory. Don't you remember what happened 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, when some reporter went to the Bay Village police
No, you better tell them about
I
that.
told you about
Well,
that.
would you tell? I don't recall exactly.
Well, I just know that,
Well, would you
this
please-
reporter went to the Bay Village
Will
Police.
you please hold this?
This reporter went to the Bay Village Police and asked a few things about the story and about your case and so. And this was an official who had been in office at the time of the tragedy.
He later became chief of the police, didn't he?
Well, I don't know what his position was, but anyway, he said.
His name was Jay Hubach, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if he's retired in the meantime, as far as I know,
Wow.
last year. So anyway, he said that he was asked about that jacket, and the reporter said, "Well, what do you say about the jacket?" He said, "Oh, I couldn't answer to that. I couldn't make any statement." And so the reporter said, "Well, if I would ask you, would your statement about the jacket, would it be favorable to Sam Shepard or favorable for the state?" And the man said, "Oh no, it would definitely be favorable to Sam Shepard."
But
That's
he
about
wouldn't-
all.
But he wouldn't give a statement.
But he wouldn't say
No,
what
but this indicates everything.
I will be right back. I want to get my clipboard, baby. Baby,
Yeah.
can't you tell more about that?
No, there isn't more. That was just it.
Okay.
Well, I think that concludes the trial part. Let's piece the other part together. Now, let's get...
The only other thing is that during,
You mean to talk about all the other pieces of evidence and so?
well, we spoke about the major things that,
Well, of course, the one point that you made, I think we better get this on tape, was the fact that they never, that the,
well, the prosecution never came across with any chain of evidence. Here's the picture, baby.
I thought you were going to mention all the things like the blood spots.
Well, we got that in another,
Well,
that's another
We have
chapter.
that's
we
another
have
check.
Paul Holmes' report. He doesn't have to have that on
Yeah.
tape.
We've got this other stuff, Dr.
Yeah, but
Kirk,
you
and
wanted
there's
to-
all
I
this
mean,
stuff.
Kirk's
That
report.
comes in another chapter.
Yeah,
That's,
but you mentioned you
Yeah.
meant to have your own view on that, right?
yeah, but we'll get-
I don't think we ought to have
I
to.
think it should be. Yeah.
Well, one thing that you said the other day was the fact that they just passed these, the chip on and the little,
Gee, what
and the
gross.
Yeah,
nail polish and the,
Right.
Looks
the
like-
blood
and a little
spot.
test tube.
looks like.
Amazing, isn't it? Gee, is this the Cleveland Stadium?
Hale Hinkle,
That's Ohio Stadium.
Ohio State.
Is that here?
That's in Columbus. That's Ohio State University, baby.
Gee, what
That's where
a lot
I
of people.
see this track, baby, down here. See the lines of the track?
Uh-huh.
That's the place where I took part in that state record
Oh.
of the
Uh-huh.
mile relay. I ran right around there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's get it,
Not quite such a crowd, however.
well,
I can understand that.
let's talk about the closing arguments.
The closing arguments seem to me to permit the prosecution to presume fantasy. There was absolutely no basis of any kind proving my diving off of the platform of the beach dressing room. They called it a beach house. It was a rickety old goddamn sextuplet dressing room deal that I'd knocked the partitions out of to make some kind of a dressing room large enough so that we could keep the motor of the motorboat in there, the outboard motor, and some fishing tackle. And the prosecution was permitted complete longitude and latitude for presuming anything. Plus explaining to the jury that they could believe anything or figure out anything or come to any possible conclusion that they wished. They were given carte blanche godliness, supremacy, to do as they wished. And this, to me, was perhaps the greatest travesty.
Man said that you received your injuries by diving over the rail, but he didn't explain the black eye, the lack of sand burns.
Right. Right. He described something and didn't back it up.
And of course, Danasaw was actually pleading for a manslaughter conviction.
That's right. Danasaw, thank you. Danasaw pled for manslaughter. Man hoped and called for first degree, Perino second degree, in essence. So the jury was given a potpourri, a fruit salad.
What was that word before?
A potpourri.
Potpourri, is that supposed to be French?
Potpourri, or is the way.
I don't know what, I guess. How do you say it?
That sounded French.
Well, how do you...
I can't make it out. What is it supposed to be?
Potpourri to us means...
Potpourri?
Pot. A pot of porridge.
Yeah.
Everything. Carrots, tomatoes, oranges, lemons, grapes, peanuts,
Potpourri.
oranges.
Potpourri.
Potpourri, yeah.
I see.
Roses,
I'm not criticizing. I was just wondering. It sounded...
carnations, anything they wanted. In other words, the jury was given this tremendous range of convictions, but only one lack of conviction. In other words, they can only say not guilty in one way, but they could say guilty in many, many, many ways. And so this is what I feel is a potpourri of conviction. And I don't think it's a fruit salad. I think Dorothy Kilgallen used that term, fruit salad, to indicate her feeling on it. That why should there be a fruit salad on one side and a potato on the other?
What did you think of Corrigan's job of summation?
Very poor.
You can why don't you elaborate on that now?
Well, Corrigan, in my opinion, was too scholarly in his summation, but I must face this fact. I was too scholarly as I answered questions. Instead of saying I ran up the stairs, I said ascended, I guess. I don't know, but that's what I read in the testimony. However, I was using medical terms, and another thing that was interesting about Dorothy Kilgallen was that after I was out of prison, she said that she finally understood why I had used these terms.
We covered that.
We covered that, did we? Okay. Well, the point is that Corrigan went into the semantics and the basic rudiments of our civilization, and he commented on the bells ringing or clanging behind the scenes. Could this be a communistic entry or a totalitarian effect? Of course, he was talking about a police state, but why in the hell didn't he say that? Do we have a police state where because policemen say that this man's guilty, then he's guilty? Because that's in effect what happened. There was no proof of my guilt. There is no proof of my guilt. There never will be, because I'm not guilty. But the man was, of course, I'm trying to give him the break, because I loved him. I had to. And he came to me and told me that he would back me up all the way. Though he died in the meantime. But the point is that in his summation, he did not mention the piece of leather, the piece of tooth, and the piece of paint or nail polish. Now these are positive things that were not attached or associated with me or Marilyn or young Sam or even the dog. And they should have been explained. And if not, they were evidence of my innocence because they were evidence of another person in that room. And I don't mean only a man.
But you can also, I mean, you don't have to take the rest for that, but you know that for anybody who cares to go through the trial record, it's very evident that Corrigan actually started really to fight when it was too late. That's when he actually went all the way. While before, I don't know, perhaps he felt too sure, or you know yourself, at one time he said to you, oh, I couldn't do that because Louis Seltzer would, burn me or break my neck or something?
Well, he didn't tell me that, baby. He told
Well, who did he say it to?
Well, this is your comment. You're the one that found that out.
Well, it's in the, it's somewhere, we have it in our clippings. I thought he said it to you.
No,
there was
not
something
to me.
that he was supposed
Well,
to
I'd
do
have discharged him on the spot.
in your defense, and he said, oh, I couldn't do that because Louis Seltzer would burn me for that or something like that. So if that was the reason why he didn't fight for you all the way during the trial, well, anyway, that's all. He started to fight as he
Well,
should
now,
have.
baby, let's get straight on that. He never told me that. You're the one that told me he said this to someone,
Well, we
either
better look
Steve
this up
or
then.
Well, see if
Richard.
you can find it. We can
We
cover
better
it.
look it up.
Ariane.
Yeah. Better look it up
Take
then.
care of that thing over there, will you? Oh, she just jumped off. She heard me talking. That cat is something.
What are you doing?
She knocked.
You're supposed to go up there.
Anyway, there's some evidence to the effect that Mr. Corrigan was under a great deal of pressure from Mr. Seltzer at the time of the trial and thereafter. Whether this had any great effect or not, I don't know.
Well, you,
I hope that this isn't the fact, but I've become less of an idealist so that I can accept some of these things.
so you felt that he didn't properly challenge or bring up the other evidence.
That's right. I felt that he was inadequate, and I felt that he spoke in terms of a wider horizon than Sam Shepard's guilt or innocence. And I don't think the jury understood him because I had difficulty. And not that I'm the brainiest guy in the world, but I have been educated. And I have passed the grades through medical school and so forth. And there's only one college graduate on that jury. And he was talking about a basic philosophy of life. This to me would have been all right for some lecture apart from the trial, but what he was supposed to talk about, in my opinion, was the evidence of another person in that room that the prosecution had not adequately explained, because the whole case, the premise of the entire case of the prosecution was that there was no evidence of another person in that house. And why he didn't push this, I'll never know. I wrote a note to the plane dealer that you should be able to obtain. The night of the prosecution, or the, I should say, the night of the persecuting group came forth with their verdict, or the following day it could have been, enumerating these points that were not explained, and that I just couldn't fathom any sort of verdict of this sort in view of these things. And even the people on a plane dealer at that time admitted that I had summated the case better than my attorneys. All three. I mean, none of them mentioned this.
Let's make sure we're getting something on there. What did you think of Blythen's charge to the jury?
I felt that the entire charge was confusing. And again, I say it was confusing to me, so it had to be confusing to the lesser educated people because he used verbiage which was a little bit difficult to follow. But when he used the George Washington cherry tree analogy or parallel to my situation in regard to circumstantial evidence, this was the crying blow. It displayed to me that this man was totally prejudiced and was asking, in effect, for a guilty verdict. That's about all I can say. I'd rather not say too much. I don't want to be prejudiced against Judge Blythen any more than I wanted him to be prejudiced against me. It's like in prison, I would never bum rap a guy, and I mean I would never even accuse a man of doing something unless I knew or I saw him take something from another man's personal belongings.
So the trial is completed and the jury goes out. How did you feel?
Well, I felt elated. I felt that they couldn't do anything but acquit me. I went up to the jail.
Must be a terrible feeling to be on trial, guilty or not guilty. It must be a terrible.
Well, it is a terrible feeling to be on trial, because though we're given the supposed premise or the supposed supposition that every man is, or woman, is innocent until proven guilty, when you're sloughed up in jail, and I'm using the vernacular, I'm not a doctor as I talk now, and you walk down to that jail, to that courtroom in handcuffs with a deputy with you
But not only that,
who
but
couldn't
doubtful
shine your
looks from
boots ordinarily.
everybody.
What?
But the doubtful looks from everybody.
Well, the point is,
That
baby,
must be a
you're
terrible
handcuffed. This is part of this, and the doubtful looks, sure, and questionable situation in general, and they have to remove the handcuffs, but they lock the courtroom door first, you see. And it's very obvious that security measures are being taken. There are bars on the courtroom window and so forth. Now, this does not presume innocence. This presumes guilt. The entire treatment presumes guilt. And this is difficult to accept, to say the very least. But after the trial, I felt, well, no possible, even a nut couldn't convict on this lack of evidence. What do they have? The only thing that they had was, the only proof that they had, and this was by my own testimony, which if I wanted to lie, I could have varied, but I didn't, was that I was in the house when Marilyn was killed. That's the only thing that they've got. They've got no weapon. They've got nothing on my hands or my eyebrows or my hair, no blood anywhere, nothing on my clothes. How could I be guilty? They couldn't find any blood on the clothes I didn't wear, let alone the clothes I did wear. That's what gets me. Plus the fact that we have absolute proof, even at the time of trial, that the clothes I had on had no blood on them. This is by the prosecution testimony.
Well, especially you should see a belt and the seam of your shoes.
Well, we've mentioned the belt and the shoes, baby,
Yeah.
before. But beyond that, we have proof by the three items that are foreign to our home.
Right.
The piece of leather the broken tooth. Now this is a piece of a human body. This is like a chunk of a finger left in the room. Say I had fought the person and had a knife and wham, knocked off the end of somebody's finger. Evidently, I got the guy. Maybe I hit him or her, or both of them if there were two. And it appears there were. But in some way, or perhaps Marilyn kicked him or her. But the point is that there's a piece of a human body, there's a piece of leather, and there's a piece of nail polish or paint that is foreign to our home, or was foreign to our home. These have not been explained, and these indicate someone other than young Sam, myself, and Marilyn being in the home. Now this, if this isn't evidence of entry or evidence of another person, I don't know what is. But in face of this, I was relaxed. I was assured in my own mind that this has got to be an acquittal. I started writing the beginning of this book in jail at that time. I don't know if we have those notes. We're in the process of looking for them now. We've gotten through most of our material, but
Did they try to match up that tooth chip with anybody that...
no, hell no. They didn't want to match it up. They were afraid to.
They knew it wasn't yours.
You goddamn right. Oh, they tried with me, of course,
Did you talk about the test slip?
and with Marilyn.
The test slip of the blood that was in there?
Well, Paul Holmes covered that pretty well, baby.
All right, so that you were...
You've got that noted, I'm sure.
so that you were relaxed. What did Corrigan say to you when the...
Well, he indicated to me that he couldn't see any other answer but acquittal until about the third day, and then he started to hedge a little. I shouldn't say hedge. He started to try to prepare me, because he said, this is a bad sign, Sam. Something's happening. Somebody is influencing someone on that jury. He said, I know there've got to be 2 or 3 prejudiced, opinionated people. This is a basis on which I demanded a change of venue. But he said he was in hopes that the people that were more intelligent would be in the ascendance. But he said that the fact that it had gone 3 days was a very bad sign, and start preparing my mind, my mental attitude for a conviction. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, they should have come back in 20 minutes with a acquittal. And it's been 3 days. So he while he gave me that initial shock of something's happening.
What did you do? I mean, did you, as the days dragged on, I assume that you became a little worried that, or were you still confident up till the end?
Well, I was still pretty confident. I became wary. I had a lot of reassurance from the fellows in prison, in the jail, I mean. 2 or 3 of them came up and told me stories about their problems, and several of them told me about the cases where they'd been guilty, and everything was there to convict them except perhaps one little little link in the chain of evidence. And because of this, they'd been acquitted. Either the judge had given a directed verdict, or the jury had not been satisfied that there was an absolute guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And I was still confident. Yes, baby.
And you had a lot of encouragement from people who were sometimes standing in line to visit you.
Yes.
Comfort you with their support.
That's right.
That was sometimes for an hour or so. the people would actually stand in line to get a minute to talk to him.
All right.
And among these was, were some of the people that are still in our corner all the way. And they gave me a lot of encouragement, a lot of help.
So on the 5th day, finally, now what did you play cards up there during this time? Or?
To be honest with you, I don't remember. I did play cards most of the time, however, that I was not in court or sleeping. I played chess, some with one of the inmates, the only one that could play chess. But there was a man, an old gentleman by the name of Tom Argento. He was in the process of being deported, or they were trying to deport him. I understand they finally did not do so. And he loved to play pinochle, and he loved to play with me because I think we both had some deep problems. And the one educated, Tom Argento, was and is an intelligent man. He may be dead by now. He would be over 70 by now. But he was running a little farm down around Medina somewhere. And evidently in the old country, he had immigrated. And in the old country, he had been a friend, or may have even been a member. He never told me, and I told him I didn't want to know, of the mafia, the beginning of the mafia group, which is, we should know, a group that was originally a group for the good of the Italian peasantry and the Italian mediocrity, we might say, and not like the mafia as we know it in this country. But the point is that they, on this basis, there was some attempt to deport him. Somebody disliked him. Somebody owed him a bill, I guess. But he was a truck farmer. He was raising asparagus and cabbage and lettuce and so forth down below Medina. Now, I may have been fooled. He may have had more activity, but I don't believe so.
All right, so
But he played pinochle with me. He and I would be partners, and we'd take on all comers. And this gave me a lot of, this boosted me a little. Perhaps he was a father image to me.
the buzzer rang, and the guy came up to get you, to bring you down.
Yeah.
Can you recall that?
Yes.
Well, tell me what happened.
Well, it was Mike Usello, the assistant sheriff or associate mudder, you know, the guy that assisted the sheriff. I think they called him assistant sheriff, Mike Usello. Maybe he's still there. He was one of the men that pressured Corrigan out on the day following my arrest. At that time, he was about 38 or 40, about my age now. And he was vigorous and not, you know, well, he was going to flab, but he was still able to handle himself, and he was a challenging man of 75 years old with two deputies behind him with clubs and who knows what. But he came up and got me, and I...
Did he say they reached a verdict?
No, he didn't. He didn't say anything of that sort. He just said it's time to go down. You see, each evening they took me down before the jury was dismissed, even to the hotel, supposedly because all comment on the part of the jury was supposed to be in my presence. Well, we found out that this was not true later, that they had called home, or their lawyers or their advisors or whoever. We don't know who they called. and talk to people outside the courtroom. But I was used to being aroused, and this particular evening I wasn't playing cards. I was lying in my cell on the bunk, sort of half asleep. I wouldn't say asleep, but just about as much asleep as I had been able to attain over that period.
You didn't get much sleep during those 5 days.
No, not much, but probably more than I'm getting right now. Because right now I'm very fearful for the care of Ariane. I'm a night watchman these days. But the point is that during certain hours I got some sleep. At that time I was sort of in between, because I knew, and I had my suit on and tie and white shirt, so I knew I had to go back down to court and appear before the jury was discharged, verdict or not. If they went for another night, if they went back to the hotel, I had to appear while Judge Blythen went through blah, 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 for another evening, and tomorrow we'll resume and all that. Of course, I was there to hear that, but not their calls outside, which is a real crock of shit. Anyway, that's why I had the suit on, and that's one reason I wasn't playing cards, because I was still sort of on the wait. Ucello came up and said, "Okay, Shepard, let's go." I got up, I grabbed a towel that my mother had sent me. It was a larger towel than we're given in jail, or than the people are given in jail, and I rubbed my face vigorously to try to get the sleep out of my eyes and look somewhat alert. And I went with him. They put the cuffs on me, and I went down with him, and they walked in, and I sat down at the trial table, and Bill Corrigan was there, and young Bill Corrigan was there, Bill Corrigan Jr., I guess his name is, and I was feeling like the other 4 nights, you see. And Bill said, "They've got a verdict, Sam. Steady yourself. It's not good." I said, "How do you know, Bill? How can you say that?" He said, "Dr. Sam, I've been through a lot of trials. All I can tell you is what I feel. But I feel that this verdict is not going to be good. But I don't care what the verdict is. The record that I've built up here will absolutely necessitate a new trial on appeal." He said it will demand a new trial. He said Blythen has been so wrong in so many ways that you will positively get a new trial. And he said, "It may be that you've been chosen to go through this because..."
This is before the verdict.
Yes. We were awaiting Judge Blythen's entry. Of course, he reiterated some of this later, as I think I mentioned before. But he said, "It may be that you've been chosen to go through this, because it isn't every man that could." Now, he may have been building me up to withstand what was coming. I don't know, but he certainly was right. And Blythen came in. He asked the jury, and the jury filed in. They were asked if they had a verdict. They said yes. And the verdict was not expressed by any of the jurymen. It was given, as I recall, in the form of an envelope, or a sealed envelope, to the judge. The judge opened the envelope and read a piece of paper and said, "Sam Shepard, or Dr. Sam Shepard, is pronounced innocent of first-degree murder." And some of the people, my family and all, went, well, some of them screamed even. Some of the women reacted favorably, and a few claps. And then he said, but guilty of second-degree murder. Well, this was, first he had pronounced me innocent, and then pronounced me guilty. This was, to me, a pretty good evidence of his feeling, but as I recount, at the time I was numbed, I was overwhelmed with reaction. And he then asked if I had any comment before pronouncement of judgment, and I said yes. I just couldn't understand that, I think you were there, my words are on record, but I couldn't understand any jury coming to this conclusion on the basis of the adverse evidence, or the evidence against my conviction, or in favor of my innocence. And he said, well, that's not my problem, or that just irregardless of this, and so forth. He went on.
You thought
So
it was
you said, I would like to say, sir, that I'm innocent, right?
Yes.
The last famous word.
Well, I said that, but then yes, that's right. I said, I would like to say, sir, that I'm innocent. And I said, and I can't understand how any intelligent jury or any jury could convict me in view of the evidence of my innocence, something of that sort. You have the words on the record, but perhaps you want my present
you thought
reaction.
you told me one time that you couldn't get it through your head that the jury didn't believe you.
Well, I couldn't get it through my head that anyone didn't believe me. Even when I went to prison, I would forget really why I was there.
But you still thought it was just a bad dream. You wouldn't have to wake up in a minute.
Yes, well, for over a year, every morning I'd wake up and I'd think, well, I hope I'm not back where I remember being. I hope it's just a dream. But there were 2 or 3 fellows who became friendly with me in prison, and 2 of them came to me and stated, well, individually, they would say, I believe you are innocent. You didn't kill your wife. And I was ready to fight him, because I said, well, why have you been around me if you had any doubt? This is an assumption. If you associate with me, you've got to believe I'm innocent. You want to go around with a guy that kills his wife? What kind of a son of a bitch are you? You know? Well, then they started to apologize and said that they had this feeling before becoming close to me. And I became very upset, because anybody that becomes my friend or attempts to extend friendship, this is a premise. This goes without saying. We don't have to discuss it, especially in prison, because those guys have wives, they've got families, and I don't want them to like a wife killer. I wouldn't go around with a guy that liked a wife killer. I don't care if the wife was a terrible old whore. I don't like guys that kill women or touch women. I never raised a hand to a woman in my life. I have to men, especially those who have insulted my wife or my family. And in prison, I've had to.
So then,
But these guys finally got through their head what was happening, that I don't associate. Well, I just couldn't imagine that anybody that would talk to me and play ball with me, baseball, basketball, football, whatever, and be friendly with me, could even imagine me as guilty. And even as I went through my daily activity, I became lost in what I was doing.
But you meant to say the guys told you, Sam, take one day at a time, right? Wasn't
Dr. Winnemore is the one that told me that.
Oh, I thought you wanted to say something that these 2 convicts said to you, because that's what you were...
No, they
out from.
just told me to relax and not be too tight about the situation. But at the same time, it was Dr. Winnemore, the chief of the Southern Ohio Red Cross, who advised me to not project too much in the future and take one day at a time. Just live one day at a time. And she is the one who developed brain tumor shortly after, about the time I left prison, and died, about 2 months ago. We sent flowers, and we were in Columbus to see Dr. Winnemore at the time that the Supreme Court decided that we could be, that I could continue on bail until they made their decision, which permitted this book to be put in word form.
Then Blythen pronounced a life sentence.
I think that the sentence was delayed 3 days, wasn't it? Something like that, so that Corrigan could go through the...
I'll have to check that out.
It may have been at the time.
I think he did. I think he gave you the verdict.
Yeah, I believe so. I think he sentenced me at the time. Corrigan did request a new trial and so forth. And yeah, you're right. I believe it was right at the time he pronounced sentence.
Well, you at that time, and you said you wanted to go right to the penitentiary.
You want orange juice, Sam?
Yeah, I would love some, yeah. Not right then. I didn't say much of anything after that, except writing this note to one of the plain dealer reporters.
And I believe
The following day.
that you wrote to your mother that day too. You gave me a letter, or your brother.
Yes, I wrote to my mother, and I referred, incidentally, directly to Dorothy Kilgallen's article because my mother had such a high feeling for Dorothy Kilgallen. And Dorothy Kilgallen had said something about they no more proved me guilty than that they're pinheaded men on Mars, and that if this is a jury system, I'm afraid, something to that effect.
I remember the headline. What was her headline? It says, "I was shocked." It was Dorothy
Something like
Kilgallen.
that, yeah. Well, my mother had a high regard for Miss Kilgallen, and I actually used this to try to encourage my mother, because I knew that my mother was, had already tried to take her life, and I was very worried about what effect this would have.
Do you want to go on for a little while longer? Or? Well,
I was going to use the term, just as well I don't use the medical term, but I felt that I was quite aware of my mother's mental state. How are we doing in chapter
we're
1?
at chapter 9 now, and we're talking about...
How about you, Bill? Would you like some?
No, thanks. No. Of course, we covered Corrigan is confident that he can upset the verdict.
Yes, and thank you. He followed through with this as he would visit me from time to time in jail, and of course the following period, following the conviction, I mean, I first lost my mother by suicide.
Yeah, we'll cover that. I'm going to cover this thing in detail.
Separately.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's part of this chapter, but Corrigan visited you several times.
Yes.
Kept saying that he...
Yes, he reassured me, and in fact bolstered me greatly by saying that this publicity problem is one that the American public or the American people have had to deal with for some time, and that it is not only something that is in regard to a racial thing or a cultural thing. It may affect anyone at any time, and that possibly I would be, and perhaps been chosen. He was a very religious guy. He was Catholic, and a devout Catholic, and he put it sort of in a religious vein that maybe I had been chosen to undergo this test and this situation in order to improve the relationship between freedom of press and a free trial, because one might, and has, in our opinion, of course, infringe the other. And he gave me this pep talk, more or less, which I must admit did help at the time.
He said he had a good record in appeals, didn't he?
He said the record was definitely one that would have to be consistent with a new trial, either on the direct appeal or the appeal of the appeal to the Supreme Court of Ohio. And but he said at that time, he said, if necessary, we'll take this to the highest court of the land, and it may be that we'll have to use another approach, because the direct appeal is seldom heard in the United States Supreme Court, because collateral is always available. But he said, if need be, we'll take it all the way and all the way, and we will win. That's what he said. And he said, don't ever feel. He said, you're like a prisoner of war, because you're fighting a battle for your country. That's the way he put it.
Well, then Blythen turned down the motion for a new trial, didn't he?
Yes, of course, that he did, and then Mr. Corrigan then called Dr. Kirk with my approval. Corrigan stopped and saw me in the jail, and he said, now, Sam, if there's anything you have to hide, anything, not that you're guilty or any such a thing, but if you are guilty of anything that you want hidden, that you don't want to come out, tell me. Or tell me not to call Dr. Kirk, because Dr. Kirk is a man whose integrity is beyond reproach, and we are calling him in to find the facts. This man can't be bought. He can't be paid, even if you had the money, which you don't. So he said, before I call him, be sure and think and search your memory. And I said, Bill, call Dr. Kirk. I've got nothing to hide. Everything that I had to hide has been brought out. And so he went ahead and arranged for Dr. Kirk to come back and carry out his investigation. This is a matter of record. I might add that Dr. Kirk saw me once just after his investigation to ask me, do you have any suggestions or additions? Although you don't know my complete report or my complete investigation, are there any points that you think I should follow or investigate that perhaps might have been overlooked in the past? That's about the way he put it.
I want to go back to this.
And I said no, I had no suggestion.
So then the Christmas holidays come and give you a time to ponder your future. What was your frame of mind at that time?
Well, I was very depressed, to say the least. But well, a lot of people were very considerate. Mrs. Heiger and Mrs. Saucian and, I can't name them all. Hazel Cameron and Mrs. Wright, Dorcas Wright, who has since died of cancer. Fred Garmon's aunt Mrs. Brandenburg is another one. Well, there were so many. I can hardly mention them all. Of course, the family and all. Dr. Howard Field and his wife sent a huge box and bag of fruit and material for Christmas. And all these things helped in a little way to give me a little break. That somebody cared. We're just about through with this.
Listen, you got a small tape? I'd like to get through this chapter here. It'll take another 10, 15 minutes and we can...
Okay. Now, I've got the small machine.
Well, this thing is...
How about this tape? Or is this the one you brought? Is that used?
Yeah, you can use that. Here it is. Put that one.
So you should mention also a few men, you know, not only Dr.
Yeah.
Howard Field. You should perhaps say Mrs. So-and-so and her family, you know. Remember that
Well,
you said, yeah, they were...
I
only
should say
women.
the Saucian
Like
family.
this,
And
nobody knows the age, and then they say, well, that isn't potential